It's called the gentleman's game. But what happens when that very game turns ungentlemanly and its dark underbelly is exposed and presented right in front of you? Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on Mirror Now. I'm Shreya Upadhyay, and with me today is a man who has not just had an illustrious career as an IPS officer in this country, but he is still ensuring that citizens remain alert and aware, and he's doing so through his books. His first two books, Dial D for Don and Khakhi Files, have been bestsellers, and now he's come up with a third interesting book, which is called A Cop in Cricket. Today I'm joined by Mr. Neeraj Kumar, former Delhi Police Commissioner, somebody who has led several anti-terror operations. He has also been at the helm of the Nirbhaya case in the national capital. He's led the CBI, and more importantly, he's also led the anti-corruption and security unit at the BCCI. Thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now, sir, and many congratulations for your third book, A Cop in Cricket.
Thank you, Shreya.
Let me get straight into the first and very simple and basic question, but a very important one. Why did you decide to write a book which exposes the corruption at India's richest cricketing governing body?
Shreya, I joined the BCCI at a certain point of time in a certain context. The 2013 spot fixing case, which was unraveled by the Delhi police, and I was the commissioner then, in which Srishant, Ajit Chandila and Ankit Chavan were arrested, had created a huge uproar in the cricketing world. So much so that the entire top brass of the BCCI had to be packed off on the orders of the Supreme Court. Two committees went into the affairs of the Indian cricket. One, the Mudgal committee, followed by the Lodha committee, and they gave certain recommendations for the improvement of the game. And it was at that point of time that I was brought in. I had retired, and so I thought that I had been brought in to set the house in order, to make sure there were no cases of corruption in cricket any longer, and so on and so forth. But to my horror, I realized that nobody was bothered about anti-corruption work, and least of all about my unit and me. So I tried to take various initiatives to kind of tell them that this is happening, that is happening. The resources are not adequate, the magnitude of the problem is huge, but they turned a totally blind eye to the whole issue. And besides that, on many occasions, I was not treated the way I ought to have been treated. Despite all these constraints, we still managed to do a lot of work, managed to bust several scandals in cricket, in domestic cricket, private leagues, doctoring of pitches in an IPL match, and so on and so forth, with our limited resources. So I thought that I need to tell this whole story, to tell the world that how cussed and how indifferent the BCCI is towards the issue of corruption in general, and how they treated an IPS officer who had been brought in presumably to set the house in order. So this whole story I wanted to tell the world, and also to tell them what kind of corruption is going on and what could be done by the BCCI despite its limited resources, and if the unit is given adequate resources, what all could be achieved. So this was the main purpose of writing the book.
So, you served at the Anti-Corruption and Security Unit of the BCCI between 2015 and 18. And I want to quote from your book where you initially talk about the murky details that you discovered. And you said, in the 3 years that I spent at the BCCI, I realized that fixing was the proverbial tip of the huge iceberg of corruption in cricket. Would you like to elaborate on why you said this is just the tip of the iceberg? What did you find out?
Yeah, so this is very important. Whenever a common lover of cricket talks about corruption in cricket, he refers to match fixing, spot fixing, Hansi Cronje, Srishant, Mohammad Azharuddin, and so on and so forth. Now this, I feel, is the tip of the iceberg, because what is below is, it defies all credibility, it defies all logic, so to say. The top level of cricket is the outcome of the system, the entire ecosystem, which is ridden with corruption at the lower level. By lower level, I mean at the level people are selected, people come through the grassroots level, they rise to the district level, then to the state level, then to Ranji Trophy and Dalip Trophy, and then to Test team and national team and so on. But this process, what happens in this process, nobody bothers about. People want that the top level games, the IPL and the Test cricket, that should be absolutely kosher, absolutely above board. But what happens below that, nobody wants to know. And that level, so I have talked about what all happens at the lower levels and how corrupt that system is, what corrupt processes a cricketer has to go through before he can make it to the top.
Okay, about that, the grassroots level corruption and the process, as you mentioned, I'm going to come a bit later, but I want to first talk about the case of the sexual harassment that one of your female staffers had faced back in 2018, which you also mentioned in the book. The accused was the then BCCI CEO Rahul Johri, and you also mentioned how he was hand in gloves with the former CAG Vinod Rai. In fact, in your book, one of the harshest criticisms is against Mr. Rai. Could you elaborate on that, why you felt that, and what exactly happened during that time?
So what I want to tell you is that both Mr. Johri and Mr. Vinod Rai were in the board under very strange circumstances. It was again a fallout of the Lodha committee recommendations. So they had been brought in on the recommendations of the Lodha committee, and the regular office bearers had to relinquish their charges, and a committee of administrators was appointed, and Mr. Vinod Rai, who was the former Controller and Auditor General of India, he was posted there as the Chief Administrator. And the committee had also recommended that there ought to be a professional CEO to run the organization, and therefore Mr. Rahul Johri had been brought in. Now what I realized that they had developed a certain kind of a very cozy relationship with each other to the detriment of the office bearers and the rest of the board. And they were running the administration as if it was their own fiefdom. So when this complaint was brought up and it was made available to me as well, I took up the matter with Mr. Rai, and he promised that he would take action, but he did nothing. Eventually, when there was a lot of public uproar, judicial committee was appointed. There again, the manner in which the committee was constituted, created, and the manner in which it functioned, it left a lot to be desired, It gave the impression that all the members of the committee had been handpicked with a very clear edict that the man had to be given a clean chit. The manner in which the proceedings were held, with total lack of transparency, etc., it showed that everything was not above board. And finally, the man was left totally scot-free. But there was one member of the committee who had not been handpicked by Mr. Vinod Rai. And that member was a lady advocate called Veena Gowda. And she differed with the opinion of the other members. And she recommended that Rahul Johri ought to be given specialized training in sexual, in gender equality and in gender treatment. So that was very odd. Why should any organization's CEO be given such a training? And should that person continue to be the CEO even after such a recommendation is made? So I have tried to narrate all those stories and how the events unfolded and what all happened.
And how does a police officer like you then navigate his way through such a situation when there is so much of pressure, not just administrative but perhaps political as well?
Well, one has to do one's best, keep one's cool and do what is required to be done. And that's what I did. In fact, when I deposed before the committee, by then I had left the BCCI, or shall I say, I was made to leave the BCCI because I was too uncomfortable to be handled by them. So I had left the BCCI, and yet I pursued the matter, and eventually nothing happened to Mr. Johri, but subsequently he had to leave.
Okay. Let me also now come to the fact that you mentioned how corruption is existing at the grassroots level and what you talked about in the whole process of selecting players for the teams, different teams at different levels. And, you mentioned a case of corruption at the Mahendragarh District Cricket Association where the chief was apparently a brick kiln owner, and he then passed on the responsibility to somebody else who was actually asking for bribes and sexual favors. I mean, what did you find out there?
So coming back again to a common lover of Indian cricket, who is only concerned about what happens at the test level or what happens at the IPL, they do not know that below the Board of Control for Cricket in India, are state associations, and below the state associations are the district associations. Has a lover of cricket in India ever bothered how the district association functions, who are its members, how are its finances managed, and so on and so forth? We don't know. Now the state associations create these district associations with virtually people who would do their biddings, who would vote for them in the state association elections, and therefore they are their nominees, and they are their handmaidens, and they could be anybody. For instance, in Mahendragarh, we were horrified to know that Bhattewala, Eat Ka Bhattewala, was the head of the district cricket association. He had outsourced it to a wholesale cloth merchant who had further outsourced it to a cricket coach, and he was running the roost, ruling the roost and doing whatever he felt like. So this is the underbelly of our cricket, and this is what I wanted to bring forth to the public, and also to tell them that at the time of selections, sexual favors are asked for from the cricketers, from young boys and girls. And in Mahendragarh, there were boys. So it was a very strange case, which I thought I must bring to the notice of.
What did the children and their parents tell you? What were they being told and what were they being promised?
Nothing was said in so many words, but the message was that if you wish to be selected for the district team, you ought to give me sexual favors.
And were you able to sort of, alert them or do something about it in terms of, that not happening anymore?
The event had happened in the past. So what we did was we informed the BCCI immediately. We submitted our report. But another thing which I have brought forth in the book is that the BCCI, which was then headed by Mr. Vinod Rai, and with Mr. Rahul Johria as the CEO, did not act or did not respond to our report whatsoever. They did not even bother to send it to the Haryana Cricket Association, leave alone taking any action against the Mahendragarh people.
Since you've been in the inside and now you're on the outside of it, how do you think this kind of a challenge or problem at the BCCI and state cricket associations can be resolved?
That's a very difficult question, because BCCI at the end of the day is a private society registered under the Tamil Nadu Registration of Societies Act. So therefore the government has no control. It has to be self-regulated. So all that the government can do is perhaps have observers from outside to keep track of what they're doing, have some kind of an audit, how much money has been earned, where it has been sent. But please don't forget that the BCCI office bearers are very powerful people. They have very powerful connections in the government, and they will never be subject to such checks and balances.
Okay. Do you see, when you sort of are now as an outsider, do you see some sort of hints or some sort of trickle down that you see that perhaps you saw when you were on the inside, that it is now reflected on the outside or publicly?
Yes, I must say things have improved because after I left, my proposal for the enhancement of manpower, that proposal was accepted. The more people are on board in the anti-corruption and security unit, all the recommendations about various controls, checks on cricketers and their contacts, those things have been put in place because of certain punishments and the fact that many cricketers came to grief because of their acts of omission and commission. People are far more careful. Cricketers are far more careful before they slip up.
Yeah. You also at one point say that spot fixing is rare now, but the BCCI is plagued with bigger challenges. What do you refer to as bigger challenges, and do you see that those issues getting resolved in the near future?
Yeah, spot fixing is that much more difficult because the quality of surveillance over cricketers and all the persons of interest who can influence them from the outside, those systems are far stricter. And Shreya, one more thing is that people have realized what is at stake. If they know that if they slip up, if a cricketer slips up even slightly on the code of conduct, their entire careers will be ruined. There was a time, at the time Mr. Azharuddin was at the helm of affairs, that it was pretty much free for all, people could indulge in what they wanted, and almost every big name in cricket was hand in glove with bookies and so on. But now it is just the opposite. There would be very, very few people who would be, in touch with bookies and fixers and so on.
But do you think, perhaps bookies and fixers, the problem of that has reduced, but with technology and other sorts of mediums coming in, there are more opportunities where people can sort of, digress from the code of conduct and then cover it up also with several options available?
That's a very good question. Yes, technology is to the advantage, or shall we say, is now, it can be used by the cricketers as well as the persons of interest who wish to compromise them by, totally bypassing the law enforcement. But also don't forget that the technology is to the benefit of the law enforcement also. It is also being used to counter those steps. So it cuts both ways.
And have our law enforcement agencies been able to at least be 2 steps ahead of the misusers of technology?
If not 2 steps, at least 1 step. Yeah, it is the advancement in technology is being used by the anti-corruption officials as well as by the law enforcement to keep a check on corruption in cricket.
Yeah. Do you also see, sir, investigations and probes having been evolved over a period of time? Because as we talked about technology coming in and social media and cyber crimes, all of this really contributing to more and more crimes taking place. Do you see, as a police officer, your part, your duty has evolved over a period of time, and now you have more things to look at, more platforms to probe?
Most definitely. People every day, even I have been retired for almost 10 years, people come to me and they say, so much money has been siphoned off from my account by cyber criminal, and most of the crimes that are being reported today are cyber crimes. So the police has to change its expertise and improve its capabilities to counter cyber crime. So that is a big challenge, and I must tell your viewers that the police is doing everything that it can to meet this challenge.
How would you caution youngsters who want to be part of cricket teams at different levels? You've seen it all. What is your advice to them when they go and meet selectors and cricket enthusiasts? And we're a country that loves their cricket as well as cinemas. So what would you like to say to them?
First of all, when you are coming up, do not take any obligations from outsiders. There would be people who would approach you that with money or with gifts like a pair of cricket shoes or a cricket kit. What they are trying to do is to become familiar with you, to befriend you, to groom you into becoming their sources of information for the future. By sources of information, what I mean is inside information, that you maybe ask, what is the constitution of the team, what is the pitch like, if you win the toss, are you going to bat first or bowl first, things like that. Because on every such event there are stakes, there are bets. So do not take obligations from outsiders. That is number one. Number two, if you do make it to the top level, do not be in touch with undesirable people. And you can easily make out who is into betting and who is not into betting. So keep away from those people. If anyone approaches you for any inside information or asks you to do something which is not kosher, please immediately inform the anti-corruption official. While you are in a tournament, do not keep in any kind of touch with outsiders, and so on and so forth. All those instructions are repeated to them day in and day out by the anti-corruption officials, and they know what the anti-corruption code is and what the do's and the don'ts are. So my advice to them is, please follow them scrupulously.
Okay, and my last question to you, sir. Your first two books have been bestsellers. A Cop in Cricket, your third book, has also created a lot of buzz, and as I was told, you're out of copies. When do we see your next book coming out? What is your next work? What are you working on?
I'm working on a book on prison. You may know that before I became Commissioner of Police, I was the Director General of Delhi Prisons, and during which time I managed the Tihar prison, the Mandoli and the Rohini prisons. So I'm writing on my experiences, and I'm also trying to let people know that the prison is not all that bad a place as is made out to be in the papers, because of certain events that have happened. If they are properly managed, if they are properly administered, most of the bad reports that you get from the prisons will stop. So I'm still to begin writing in right earnest, but yeah, that is my next project.
All right, here's wishing you all the best for this book as well as your next work. Thank you very much, Mr. Neeraj Kumar, for talking with us at Mirror Now.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Mirror Now.